Well, hello there. So, I would just like to talk about something called microbehaviors. It's a very vague topic, and there's not really very much we know about it, and that's why we're kind of grouping everything into one big thing. The hypothesis goes that there is a lot to the voice that we don't control consciously, and well, we know that that's true, but how far does it go? I believe it goes pretty far. I believe that microbehaviors are actually way more significant than we give them credit for. So, what are microbehaviors? Well, let's look at glottal behaviors first. Glottal behaviors is an even broader category, and inside this broad category, there are a lot of elements. So, it's as large scale as vocal weight and pitch, and as small scale as onsets. So this one concept of glottal behavior covers things as wide as the difference between this voice and this voice, and the difference between and So yes, it's a big, broad category, and inside this category is like glottal micro behaviors. Micro behaviors are how we affect the voice on an even smaller level than things like onsets. Onsets you can kind of just have happen because you can train for them. You can hear the difference. It's just a very small difference. Micro behaviors, you can definitely hear. There's a huge difference when you have trained micro behaviors versus untrained. However, the way that you actually get that to happen is pretty much entirely through mimicry at the moment. We basically don't really know very much about what's contained within microbehaviors as a concept. Quite similar to the situation with glottal behaviors being so broad. It's kind of like everything that we can't consciously control as a large scale element. So, for example, vocal weight, resonance, pitch, that sort of thing. So, what's an example of microbehaviors? So, if we take a feminine voice and we drag this down to a lower pitch like this, and we're at this lower pitch and we're talking here, and maybe this sounds androgynous, maybe it sounds feminine, I don't know. And then now we're going to go to a typically masculine voice, and we're going to take that up to the same sort of level. And why does this sound like drastically different, even though it is at the same sort of configuration, in terms of the large scale elements? I believe that the main difference is something so small that we can't really measure or identify it very well. I think that these things are the intricacies with which we make the voice happen. So not these large scale elements, but the very small scale elements. So, how do we train micro behaviors? Well, as I said before, it's pretty much just mimicry. That's all we really have at the moment as a method of training these things. So, how do we do mimicry? Well, we have to find a voice to mimic first. So, what kind of voice should we look for? I believe that a voice needs to be in your range. So, it has to be, the base elements have to be achievable fairly comfortably. You don't want to be like belting everything. Basically, you want things to be as easy as possible for you to focus on the small things. So, nothing that's like really, really, really fast and it's really, really hard to keep up or anything like that. Nothing that is really, really, really ridiculously high resonance. Nothing that's really high in pitch or intonation. Something that shows off the elements that you want, but without all of the difficulty associated with like copying the whole voice. The reason why this is so important is that when we do mimicry, we want to have the small things be the only thing we're focusing on. Everything else should be fairly automatic. We should be able to just copy the voice, and then the little tiny things, the micro behaviors, is all that's left. So the more comfortable it is to get into the basic sort of configuration of the voice, the better. Now, the second thing is obviously it has to be a good example of the micro behaviors that you want to learn. So, for example, if you want to learn to have like, you go too low and you have this really deep voice that is very low in pitch, fairly high in resonance, light in vocal weight, but it doesn't sound bright and you want it to sound bright, you want it to sound really crisp, then you can find a voice that is very, very bright at a low pitch and copy that voice for all of the microbehaviors that are associated with it. So now that we have our voice that we want to copy, how do we actually go about doing it? What I suggest is getting a small clip of that voice. I'm talking about 2 to 4 seconds, very short enough that you can remember all of the words and all of the intonation so that you can do it precisely the same way every time. The longer the clip is, the more you have to keep in your mind and the more you have to remember and build up to actually just being able to approximate the main aspects of the voice before you can get to the actual thing that you want to learn, which is the microbehaviors. Okay, so next what we want to do, now that we've got this clip, is add a beep to the beginning. Now, this is optional, of course, but it helps a lot with timing, and that means that we can kind of like dub over the voice a little bit more reliably, and we don't have to like, be like a half a second behind and get confused and all of that sort of stuff. So having a little beep at the beginning is really good. Doesn't have to be the same for every clip, just has to be the same for that one clip. So when you play it, the beep goes beep talking, right? And then when it happens again, beep talking, you can get that same timing. So the actual time between the start of the clip, the beep, and then the speech doesn't really matter as long as it's the same every time you play the clip. Next, what we want to do is actually write out exactly what is said in the clip. Then we want to try to approximate the intonation and speech patterns that are in that clip. So we want to get ready to actually mimic it. It's very important to notice every little aspect of the voice. Does it fluctuate in resonance? Is it like heavy? Is it low in resonance? What are the components of the voice? Now, I'm not saying overanalyze. You shouldn't really overanalyze. You should feel the voice, if that makes sense. You should get an idea of the very subjective side of how you feel about the voice. We're trusting our subconscious to do most of the work for us, and so it has to be fairly subconscious as to how we actually get the information of the voice in the first place. So caring about R1 values and that sort of thing is not really needed in this case. Okay, so how do we actually go about mimicking? So what I suggest is 2 methods. The first one being play and repeat. So essentially we're just going to play a clip and then we're going to repeat that clip in our own voice, trying to approximate their voice as much as possible. Again, you have to be really paying attention to the qualities in the target voice and be very willing to explore the possibilities of how you're actually going to get to that voice. So it might mean doing something that is very counterintuitive. So for example, you might think that you need to have really lightweight like this, and you have to have like really high resonance and all of this stuff, but actually like there might be a voice that is very heavy and a little bit low in resonance that sounds just as feminine, and you'll have to change these aspects in ways that you might not expect in order to get to them. So pay attention to what's actually happening in the voice and basically just like completely forget all of the preconceptions and things about what you expect you should be doing. Okay, so now for a demonstration of how to actually do this. Okay, here goes.
But they can also be a bit of a nightmare because...
Okay, now I'm playing it in my head as I'm doing this. But they can also be a bit of a nightmare because...
But they can also be a bit of a nightmare because...
But they can also be a bit of a nightmare because... Now, the question is, how do you know you're going in the right direction? Well, analyze your own voice, record it and play it back. Notice if there's any kind of changes happening. Notice how much it feels like your voice, and if it's sounding like it's a little bit less like your voice, and your self-bias is getting a little bit less strong, then you know that you're going in the right direction. The other thing is just pay attention to the big sound qualities. Does it sound bright or dark? What is the overall sound quality of the voice? Is it what you set out to do when you first decided to mimic this clip? You pick a voice, say you want to get a brighter voice, so you pick this clip that is a good example of a bright voice. Now, does your voice sound brighter after mimicking it? Well, if it does, then you're going in the right direction. If it doesn't, it just means that you need to try different things in order to figure out what is going on. Again, without overanalyzing, just intuitively feel that the sound is changing and your vocal tract will do the rest. It's incredible how powerful the subconscious is if you let it be expressed. Okay, so that's the first method. Let's talk about the second method, which is dubbing over the clip. So this one can take a little bit more effort to get used to at the beginning, and this is why it's very important to pick a clip that's not too fast in tempo. If they're talking really fast, then you won't be able to keep up, basically. So basically the idea here is you play it once, then when it happens again and you hear the beep, you get ready to dub over it as it's happening. I mean, this will be probably pretty hard at first, so just be ready to have a lot of failure and a lot of fun doing this. Okay, let's do a demonstration.
But they can also be a bit of a nightmare because...
Ready?
But they can also be a bit of a nightmare because...
Okay, so why do we have these two methods? If each one of them does what you would expect, helps you mimic a clip, why do we have two? Well, if we only use the first method, if we only use play and repeat, then we wouldn't get as much of the intonation and the tempo changes and that sort of stuff. We'd miss out on some of the speech pattern related things. Likewise, if we only did the dubbing over method, we might lose out on actually listening to the clip and paying attention to the sound qualities, and we wouldn't get as much of an impact on getting the actual micro behaviors to come out. So they go together really well. So really important to do both. And then the third method is just to have like audio of the voice in general playing. So like it might be like a longer segment, maybe like half an hour of voice just playing in the background, and then every now and then you just come in and try to repeat things that they say. So yes, give it a try. It is really useful. I hope that we will soon be able to study precisely what is like under the vague umbrella of micro behaviors, so that we can better understand exactly what's going on. For now, I'm doing a project where I'm trying to get all of the known micro behavioral related voice qualities, put them into a list with examples. That's, I think, the best we're going to get for a little bit. In terms of actually what is physically happening, I don't think that's going to be studied for quite a while. It's also entirely possible that what we're referring to as micro behaviors is actually things that we already know, just in different mixes. So yeah, I hope this helps, and yeah, let me know how you go, and yeah.